I've been thinking a lot about this whole conversation about, I see on the table, the anxious generation. And I've been thinking a lot about his push to ban cell phones in schools.
Jonathan Haidt.
Jonathan Haidt,
Yeah.
yeah. And, that's one of the major kind of points of his plan. And I think a lot about, well, I can't tell the difference between if there's a human in the room or if there's technology in the room. But one thing I know for sure is that if those two classrooms don't have the same access to that technology or to the internet, then I can start to talk about predicting outcomes, right? Something we often talk about at the Reinvention Lab is the type of deep learning, the type of rich, human-centered learning that works with our brains and also works in a time of rapid increasing technology should not be come across just by luck or luxury, right? And so I can't tell in that scenario, but what it makes me think is when I hear this conversation about banning phones, I think of all the potential positives of that, but I think about also how in some classrooms, in some places in America today, phones are the access to the internet and the access point to technology that will then prepare them for a technology-driven future. And so as long as the access is the same, I can't tell. But we also have to have a conversation about access, which is kind of the unsexy thing, but is also kind of part of this conversation.
I've been looking for analogs, and one of the analogs everybody talks about the calculator. I worry that it's too narrow to draw lots of conclusions from it. But I think maybe more apt is the computer and like the keyboard. And so if you look at what school was like before, like basically the 1980s and before, students are writing about half a page of like long form prose on average per week. You get to the 2010s and it's like 3 to 5 pages. And I don't know that people say with school is getting harder. It's just technology is enabling more outputs in service of learning. And it is really troubling to imagine if you're that kid that doesn't have access to a computer and is now having to handwrite, those 3 to 5 pages and doesn't have spell checker, doesn't have access to, the World Wide Web, for better or worse. You start to get, and then of course the analog comes to AI, where there's this whole like question of like, do we ban it? Do we not ban it? And there's this presumption that if it's not banned, if AI is allowed, then all the students have access to not just AI, but the same model, because there's enough divergence in terms of the quality of the models that you actually could imagine some kids having an advantage just because they have, they're paying for GPT Pro $200 a month. But that brings me to this like sort of deep respect for like teachers who have been concerned about students using ChatGPT. I don't think it's because they're Luddites. I don't think it's just because they're like not with the times. I think they're sensing the power of this technology. They don't understand it. And if there's something that has the potential for, potentially and maybe even probably harming learning, if you don't adapt to the reality of that technology. I think there's actually a lot of risks of just sort of like just having sort of almost like a free for all. Does that make sense?
It does, and
without putting you on the spot for your opinion about whether ChatGPT is cheating, feel free to.
Well, I've been thinking a lot about our conversation. A couple things. One, I've been thinking a lot about our conversation we had a couple months ago where you were pushing me on shortcuts and how teachers are reasonably concerned that it's not just about cheating, but around intellectual and cognitive shortcuts, and whether or not how heightened our concern should be around taking a shortcut to writing that 3-page prose paper and just writing it with ChatGPT and editing it. And what are we losing in that scenario? And we can run this in the show notes, but I also recently listened to an hour talk that Alex told me I should listen to, and he was right. So if he ever tells you to listen to a talk, you should listen to it.
Yeah, David Autor.
And what I thought the airplane example was fascinating. And on the shorthand, it was that, there was a scenario where, correct me if I'm wrong, airplanes were crashing because pilots were so reliant on autopilot that they didn't know how to fly in high altitude. They just didn't have the practice. And obviously there's so many correlations there with possibilities for education, and having to have the discernment, again, as having the human judgment and discernment to say, hey, what things are we okay to take shortcuts on? Like, what things are not going to be as necessary in the future? Maybe we can take shortcuts here, but actually these things are fundamental skills that we have to learn. That's a whole, because we build the technology, we build in the judgment. And I think one thing that makes me think is, how do we bring more, again, human talent, right? Educators to the table to be building that judgment into the models, but also building judgment into future curricula that is going to be a part of this AI world. The other thing is that I don't remember who said this, and so I might be getting the statistic wrong. So I don't mean to peddle fake statistics on your podcast, but it was some larger percentage than I had expected that I heard that are, maybe you know the statistic, but teachers who are using AI to grade papers, like that has, the percentage that I heard, it was something like 20%, maybe. It was high enough where I was kind of shocked by it, because again, human judgment is so important in the analysis of student work. I've always been worried about that stop point, because there is so much. I mean, we think about something like writing, or we think about something even like art, things that are just human and subjective. The idea that we could run some of these things through AI and make our grading process more efficient without losing some sort of deep human-to-human cognitive assessment of some of our more like fundamental human skills, that concerns me. And so I'm trying to kind of calibrate, even for myself, like, okay, what are places where we can take shortcuts? And for me, at least right now, although my opinions are known to change, assessment is an area that I'm generally cautious.